Hey friends, got another gameplay video, this one featuring Tifa in first seat. This is a Voltron style deck that wants to trigger landfall and get Tifa big enough to knock players out in one hit. Going second is Gisela. This is just a Boros good stuff deck. In third seat is Teval, a Sultai commander that likes to put cards in its own graveyard and then bring them back, just generating as much value as possible from graveyard type shenanigans. And then going last is Rakdos, Lord of Riots. This is a group slug deck that forces opponents to lose life and then tries to flood the board with creatures at a reduced mana cost. And Tifa's going to start us off with a forest, passing to Gisela, who plays Boros Guildgate. And Teval is going to open up with a Myriad Landscape, passing to Rakdos, who will play a swamp his first turn, who passes to Tifa and then plays a forest, passing to Gisela, and she'll play a mountain, and then a Lightning Greaves. Teval will untap and play a forest, and then for 2 mana plays Shigeki Jukai Visionary. Passing the turn to Rakdos, we'll see an Evolving Wilds. It'll immediately be cracked for a mountain. And then Rakdos will pass to Tifa, who will play Field of Ruin. And then Tifa's going to play the Traveling Chocobo. Passing to Gisela, she'll untap and play a mountain. Into Crib Swap, exiling the Traveling Chocobo, giving Tifa a 1/1 Changeling. Teval's going to untap, play Terramorphic Expanse, sacrifice Terramorphic Expanse, searching up a swamp to the battlefield tapped, go to combat, attacking Rakdos for 1, and Rakdos will be at 39. Second main phase, we'll see a Satyr Wayfinder. This will get an island into Teval's hand, and pass to Rakdos, who will untap and play Exotic Orchard for turn. And then for 2 mana, we'll see Blood Artist, passing the turn to Tifa, who will bring herself out onto the battlefield, and then go to combat, attacking Gisela for 1. Passing the turn to Gisela, she'll untap, and then we'll see a Worn Power Stone. Passing to Teval, who will untap and play an island, and then activate Myriad Landscape, sacrificing it to fetch up 2 islands to the battlefield tapped. Then we'll see a Stitcher Supplier, a 1/1, that when it enters or dies will mill Teval 3 cards. Passing to Rakdos, who will play 2 for a Thought Vessel, giving him no maximum hand size, and then another 2 for a Felwar Stone, which can also tap for both red as well as black. At the end of Rakdos' turn, we'll see Tifa play Snakeveil Skin, giving her a +1/+1 counter as well as hexproof until end of turn. And then untap, going to combat, Gisela will be attacked by both Tifa as well as the Changeling, bringing her life down to 36. And then Tifa will pass the turn, Gisela untapping and paying 4 for a Faith's Fetters. This will gain Gisela 4 life, but more importantly, it'll lock down Tifa as she will no longer be able to attack, block, or use activated abilities. And then we'll see a Secluded Step entering the battlefield tapped. Passing the turn to Teval, who will untap and for a 5 play Will of the Sultai, activating its second ability, giving Shigeki 5 +1/+1 counters and trample until end of turn. And then going to combat, Teval will attack Rakdos with everything. No blocks, so Rakdos will be at 31 at the end of combat. And then second main phase, Teval is going to play Golgari Rot Farm, bouncing an island back to hand. Passing to Rakdos, will untap and then play Valgavoth. Then at the end of turn, we'll see Biosynthetic Burst from Tifa. Play a forest for turn, triggering Tifa, so she'll double in size. And then play Skyshroud Claim for 4, allowing her to search her library for up to 2 forests and put them onto the battlefield. This will also trigger Tifa 2 more times, and then the Shapeshifter will attack Gisela for 1. Tifa will pass to Gisela, who will untap and then bring out a Dawnbreak Reclaimer. After hitting the battlefield, we will see the Lightning Greaves get attached to the Dawnbreak Reclaimer, giving it haste and shroud. And then going to combat, we will see the Angel attack Tifa, bringing her life total down to 35. Teval untapping and then playing a Swamp for turn. And going straight to combat, we see Teval attack Gisela with everything. No blocks, and then second main phase, we'll see Teval hit the battlefield. And then a Milliken as well. And then pass to Rakdos, who untaps and goes to combat, attacking Tifa with Valgavoth. Tifa will go down to 31 as she doesn't have any flyers to block with. And then second main phase, we'll see Rakdos, Lord of Riots, hit the battlefield. Passing the turn to Tifa, she'll untap and play a Broker's Hideout, which will gain her a life and trigger Tifa twice, as the Hideout will hit the battlefield, and then fetch a basic, which will hit the battlefield. Cultivate from Tifa, which will trigger Tifa an additional time, that forest hitting the battlefield tapped. And then the Changeling to attack Gisela, bringing Gisela's life total down to 30. Untapping, Gisela will play Banishing Light, targeting Rakdos. This will exile it until the Banishing Light is removed, so Rakdos will return to the command zone. And then the Dawnbreak Reclaimer to attack Rakdos. No blocks, bringing Rakdos down to 26 life. And then Gisela will pass to Teval, who will play Command Tower for turn, and go to combat, attacking Rakdos, triggering Teval, so mill 3 cards. And I make an error here in that Teval is supposed to make zombie druid creatures, but I made just regular zombie tokens. But I do notice it part way through the game, so we'll see different tokens later, but for now you get regular zombies. And then also we will see Teval bring Myriad Landscape back as well. No blocks from Rakdos, so Rakdos' life total will be 14 at the end of combat. And then second main phase, we'll see a Timeless Witness, allowing Teval to get a card back from the graveyard to hand. And he will choose Junji, the Midnight Sky, a 5/5 flyer with Menace that gives you a couple options on death, none of them good for any of Teval's opponents. A card left the graveyard, so that'll trigger Teval again, so you'll see another zombie. And then we'll see a Reassembling Skeleton, a 1/1 that can get returned from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped, or a colorless in black. Passing to Rakdos, he'll untap. Again, going to combat, Valgavoth will attack Tifa. No blocks, bringing her life total down to 28. And then we'll see the Persistent Constrictor for 5, a 5/3, that has, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, they lose 1 life, and you put a -1 counter on up to 1 target creature they control. Also comes with Persist, so if it dies without any -1 counters itself, it will get brought back to the battlefield with a -1 counter. Passing to Tifa, she'll untap. That'll trigger the Persistent Constrictor at the beginning of upkeep. So he will target Tifa to get a -1 counter. Also, she will lose a life, and then Valgavoth will get triggered because an opponent lost life, so it'll get a plus counter as well as draw Rakdos a card. And then we will see a Karn's Bastion from Tifa, triggering her, and then Splendid Reclamation, bringing all land cards from her graveyard back to the battlefield tapped. Only one to get there in the Broker's Hideout, so Tifa will gain a life and get a forest to the battlefield tapped. Again, triggering Tifa, doubling up her power until end of turn. And then Changeling will go to combat and attack Gisela for 1, bringing her life total down to 29. Tifa will pass to Gisela, and then that'll trigger the Persistent Constrictor. Can't force the Reclaimer to get a -1 counter, as she's got the Greaves equipped. However, that will force her to lose a life, which will again trigger Valgavoth, gaining a plus counter and drawing a card for Rakdos. And then we'll see Command Tower from Gisela, and then she'll bring herself onto the battlefield. A 5/5 flyer with First Strike, who causes her permanents to deal double damage and her opponent's damage to be cut in half. Going to combat, we'll see the Reclaimer attack Rakdos, who doesn't have any flyers, so he'll take 5 doubled, so it'll be 10, bringing Rakdos' life down to 4. Passing to Teval, he'll untap, and then that'll trigger the Persistent Constrictor, giving one of the zombie tokens a -1 counter and losing a life. Valgavoth will get triggered, so another plus counter and more cards to be drawn by Rakdos. And then Putrefy from Teval, destroying Gisela, returning her back to the command zone. And that'll trigger the Blood Artist because a creature died, so Rakdos will drain Tifa for 1. And then Teval is going to attack Rakdos with everything he's got. This will trigger Teval, so milk some cards, get a land to the battlefield tapped. Card left the graveyard, so we'll get another token. And then Shigeki will be blocked by the Blood Artist. The Timeless Witness will be blocked by a Persistent Constrictor. And the Witness will die, Rakdos getting knocked out of the game. And then second main phase, we'll see Junji from Teval, who passes to Tifa, but at the end of turn, Tifa's going to go ahead and activate Karn's Bastion, proliferating and giving herself another plus counter. And then she'll untap, play a forest for a turn. That'll trigger Tifa, doubling up her size. And then we'll see Nissa, a Vital Force from Tifa Lockhart. Tifa's going to go ahead and activate Nissa, untapping one of her lands and turning it into a 5/5 until end of turn, or until her next turn, I should say. And then Gisela's going to untap and play Death of Daragaz, kicked, so it'll deal 4 damage to each creature without flying and each player. This will wipe most of the board, sending Tifa back to the command zone as well as a bunch of other creatures to the graveyard. Stitcher Supplier will also be triggered as she will die, so 3 more cards to be milled into Teval's graveyard. And then Dawnbreak Reclaimer to attack Nissa, bringing her loyalty down to 1. Thought Vessel from Gisela, second main phase. And then Teval will untap, return Reassembling Skeleton to the battlefield tapped from the graveyard. That'll trigger Teval, so he'll now get a Zombie Druid. This is the token I should have been generating all along. And then activate Myriad Landscape, sacrificing it to get 2 forests to the battlefield tapped. And then going to combat, we'll attack Nissa with Teval, and then the other creatures will go ahead and attack Tifa's life total directly. Teval will get triggered, and Myriad Landscape will get brought back to the battlefield. This will also trigger Teval another time, getting another Zombie Druid token. And then the Forest is going to go ahead and block Shigeki. Everything else going unblocked. The Forest will die, and Tifa's life total will be reduced to 16. Second main phase, we'll see a Haunted Mire from Teval. And then for 5 mana, an Escaped Woe Strider, which will enter with 2 plus counters and a 0/1 goat token. That triggers Teval because another card left his graveyard, so we'll see another Zombie Druid. And then our goat from the Woe Strider. Tifa will go ahead and untap, bring herself out onto the battlefield. And then for 5, Nylea's Forerunner. Passing the turn to Gisela, she'll untap and play Terramorphic Expanse. Go ahead and activate it right away to fetch a Plains to the battlefield tapped. And then for 6, play Inferno Titan, a 6/6 that when it enters, deals 3 damage divided as she chooses, and she will deal all 3 of it to the Forerunner, removing it from the battlefield. And Gisela will pass to Teval, who untaps, activates Myriad Landscape, fetching 2 swamps to the battlefield tapped. And then a Timeless Witness will be eternalized, giving Teval a 4/4 creature token and returning a card from his graveyard to hand. He will return the Nauseous Gearhulk, a 5/4 with Menace that can destroy a creature on entering and gain Teval some life. That'll trigger Teval a couple of times because multiple cards left Teval's graveyard. So a couple zombie druids to enter the battlefield. And then an Evolving Wilds for a turn, activating it right away to get an island to the battlefield tapped. And then Teval will all-out attack Tifa. This triggers Teval again, milling some more cards. We'll see Memorial to Folly come from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. That'll also trigger Teval's second ability, so we'll see another zombie druid. And then Tifa will block the reassembling skeleton, which will destroy it. But as she's not able to block anything else, we'll knock her out of the game. And then Teval is going to go ahead and get triggered another time because the reassembling skeleton is getting brought back again. And so we will see another zombie druid. Passing the turn, it'll go to Gisela, who untaps and brings herself onto the battlefield. And then passes the turn back to Teval, who activates the Woe Strider at the end of turn, sacrificing the reassembling skeleton to scry 1. And then untaps, pays 2 to bring the reassembling skeleton back. That will trigger Teval because a card left the graveyard, so we'll get another zombie druid token. And then we'll see Rampant Growth, so he'll fetch a forest to the battlefield tapped. And then goes all out and attacks with everything that doesn't have Summoning Sickness, with the exception of a goat token. Triggering Teval, so we'll get another land, this one Temple of Malady, scrying 1 when it enters. And then a card left the graveyard, so we'll see another zombie druid token. Teval getting a little bit out of control here. And then we'll see blocks like that. The Dawnbreak Reclaimer to block Woe Strider, Inferno Titan to block Shigeki, and then Gisela to block Teval. Everything else going unblocked. However, Gisela will get triggered during damage, so all of the damage that her permanents are dealing will get doubled, and then all of her opponent's damage will get halved. After combat damage, Teval will get returned to the command zone, Woe Strider and Shigeki will be removed, and Gisela will have 15 life remaining. And then second main phase, should have played it first main, we'll see Noxious Gearhulk enter, and he will destroy Gisela when it enters, gaining himself some life. And then we'll also see the Woe Strider get escaped again, so we'll see another goat token and a couple plus counters on the Woe Strider. And then pass the turn to Gisela, who untaps, plays a Dreamstone Hedron, and then Keeper of the Core, a 3/4 for 4 mana. No attacks from Gisela, so she'll pass the turn to Teval, who untaps, and then goes straight to combat, attacking with everything. Blocks will go like so, but it isn't enough to block everything, and the zombie druids and other creatures will deal enough damage to knock Gisela out of the game. This will mean Teval is the winner of today's game. Good on him, got a ton of value out of everything he had going on. Lots of synergies between all the pieces on the battlefield. Highlights from today's game. Pretty cool to see Rakdos as well as the Persistent Constrictor and Valgavoth kind of go off. Got multiple triggers in just one turn cycle with both of these on the battlefield, but had too low of a life total to really stay in the game. Getting knocked out second was Tifa. Traveling Chocobo, kind of a highlight, just in that it's a very powerful card, although it didn't get utilized at all. And it was really cool to see Skyshroud Claim get played and Tifa Lockhart's power go up really high. Unfortunately, misplays from the Lockhart player as she used her protection a little bit too early. If she would have saved that snakeskin, I think it was, snakeskin veil, she would have been able to give herself hexproof. Lockhart player was stating that they wanted to get counters on her creature and had ways to give her indestructible, but that doesn't get around the R's that targeted her, so probably should have kept the protection up, but sometimes you just don't know. Getting knocked out last was Gisela. Breath of Daragoz was a highlight as it kind of made the game go a little bit longer. Would have kept her in the game if she had a better board wipe that would have actually wiped the entire board, but couldn't get it off. And it was cool to see Faith's Fetters lock a player out of the game. Those type of effects can really penalize players that rely heavily on their commanders. Also cool to see Gisela prevent a lot of damage and keep her in the game one turn longer, Although Teval did have the Noxious Gearhulk in hand and could have removed her. Just forgot it was there, I guess. I'm not really sure. Lots of cool stuff on Teval's side of the board. A lot of synergies. Teval never getting removed is just an issue, as he just gets tons and tons of value. 2/2 zombie druid tokens, lands coming back over and over again. But my favorite interaction was just the Woe Strider sacrificing the reassembling skeleton and then getting brought back to generate even more tokens for Teval. Hope you guys enjoyed that gameplay. If you liked the video, you should consider subscribing by clicking the button in the top left. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by giving this video a thumbs up or by leaving a comment down below. Otherwise, YouTube thinks you'll like the video in the top right, or you could check out either of the playlists on the bottom. And as always, have a great day.